You're getting rid of your most qualified people, and even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody, and then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap, because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. What it is that the FBI is doing, except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice, or whatever you want to call him.
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me, as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us.
Representative Jasmine Crockett at her sharpest, unapologetically holding power to account in a way that too few lawmakers are willing to do these days.
Man, oh man, there has been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. So I'm just going to make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that
That's
you are
false.
the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you were already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe, I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacist, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues, and frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people, and even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody, and then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap, because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice, or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem, the one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. If the gentleman would like to respond to any of that. Well, I mean, I'll respond. Cash Patel, as I said when I introduced him, public defender, former prosecutor, top staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, Deputy Director of National Intelligence with the National Security Council, Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, and FBI Director. I think that's a pretty good resume for the guy who's now running the top law enforcement agency in our country, and we've seen all the stats that he's given to the committee on how much better they're doing at getting the bad guys than the previous guy was doing. With that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I think you're witnessing some auditions, clickbait auditions for the Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues. We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. But do you care, before I launch into my line of questioning, to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display?
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Thank you, Director, for that, and we appreciate your service. We appreciate the results speak for themselves, I think, pretty plainly, and your commitment not only to results, but to transparency, so we do appreciate that.
Her confrontation with Cash Patel, the man with deep ties to Trump's inner circle and a resume that reads more like a political fixer's checklist than a record of impartial public service, was not just about one dinner, one case, or one moment. It was about exposing a culture of complacency and political loyalty that has infected parts of our justice system. Crockett's words cut through the noise. She reminded us that the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, was handpicked by Donald Trump, and that his record speaks for itself. The failures she pointed to aren't isolated blunders. They're part of a disturbing trend of weakened accountability and misplaced priorities. The idea that the FBI, one of the most powerful law enforcement bodies in the world, could take over a decade to get fully staffed while diverting resources away from genuine domestic threats is deeply alarming. But what made Crockett's commentary even more significant was the moral and human weight behind it. When she said she doesn't feel safe as a black woman in America, that wasn't political theater. It was a statement of lived reality. Because while we hear endless rhetoric about law and order, the truth is that white supremacist violence has been rising, and federal responses have too often been sluggish or deflective. The threats she cited, death threats to members of Congress, families sleeping with guns out of fear, HBCUs being targeted, these aren't abstract statistics. They're symptoms of a government that has, under certain leadership, looked the other way while domestic terrorism grew bolder. And then there's the hypocrisy. The same people who champion justice and transparency have spent years defending Trump allies, dismantling trust in federal institutions, and weaponizing oversight for partisan gain. Crockett called that out with precision, pointing out that under Patel and his allies, investigations seemed to serve political optics rather than truth. Her jab about putting on a show for The Apprentice wasn't just a punchline, it was a truth bomb. Because too often, this is exactly what the modern GOP's oversight has become: performative outrage, distraction politics, and selective enforcement. All while the real threats, violent extremists, corruption, hate-fueled attacks, go unchecked. And let's not ignore what she said about accountability. Crockett wasn't just making a partisan argument, she was demanding something that every American should want: an FBI that's transparent, competent, and willing to confront threats regardless of who's behind them. If our justice system becomes a political stage rather than a pillar of democracy, then no one is safe. Not lawmakers, not communities, not even the truth itself. Her fiery tone might make headlines, but beneath that fire was a challenge to all of us, to stop accepting mediocrity in the name of political loyalty. Crockett's confrontation wasn't just a takedown of Patel. It was a defense of democracy, accountability, and safety in a time when all three feel under siege. So here's the takeaway. When leaders like Jasmine Crockett stand up and speak truth to power, especially against figures like Cash Patel and those shielding Trump's legacy, they're not just making noise. They're doing the work that too many avoid. Because democracy doesn't survive on silence. It survives when someone has the courage to say, enough. If you believe in that fight for justice, for safety, for accountability, make sure you're paying attention, sharing these moments, and holding every official, Republican or Democrat, to the same standard. Because the next chapter of American democracy will be written not by the loudest voices, but by the most courageous ones.